In a small village nestled along the edge of a quiet river, life moves slowly. The sun rises each day over the thatched roof huts and dirt roads, casting a warm glow on the familiar surroundings. Yet beneath this peaceful exterior, there are whispers of a test, a challenge that no one could have anticipated. This village is about to witness a story of deception, of secrets, and the true nature of a woman's heart. At the heart of this story is Elizabeth, a woman of humble beginnings. She has spent most of her life working as a servant in the homes of the wealthy, cleaning, cooking, and caring for others. She had always dreamed of a life beyond these walls, a life where she could live with dignity, but that dream seemed far out of reach. For now, she was just a maid, bound by circumstance and fate. But Elizabeth's life was about to change. The family she had been serving for years, the prestigious Montgomery family, had asked her to take on an unusual role. The matriarch of the family, Mrs. Montgomery, had grown increasingly suspicious of her daughter-in-law, Claire. Mrs. Montgomery, a proud woman with a long-standing reputation for being able to see through the hearts of people, had begun to worry that Claire was not the kind-hearted woman she appeared to be. So, in a decision that would set everything in motion, Mrs. Montgomery had devised a plan to test her daughter-in-law's heart. "I will go undercover," she decided. "I will disguise myself as a servant and see how Claire treats me. If she is truly kind, then she will treat me with respect. If she is deceitful, then she will show her true colors." Elizabeth had no idea what she was walking into when Mrs. Montgomery had made this request. After all, she was just a servant, a nobody. But the plan was set into motion, and Elizabeth was about to witness firsthand the nature of the woman who would become her mother-in-law. She agreed to take on the role of the new servant in the Montgomery household. The day arrived when Elizabeth, dressed in the plainest of clothes, was introduced as the new maid. She was told to keep her true identity a secret, as Mrs. Montgomery wanted to observe Claire's behavior without her knowing that she was being tested. For Elizabeth, it was an uncomfortable position. She had always been a servant, but now she would have to keep her head down even more, playing a role that was foreign to her. The first few days were tense. Elizabeth watched as Claire went about her business, treating the other staff with a mix of disdain and indifference. She wasn't unkind, but there was a certain coldness in her demeanor, as if she saw the servants as little more than tools for her convenience. But Elizabeth could sense something more beneath the surface, a prideful arrogance that bordered on cruelty. One day, as Elizabeth was scrubbing the floors in the grand hallway, she overheard Claire speaking with a friend in the drawing room. "Do you really think my mother-in-law will ever accept me?" Claire's voice was tinged with frustration. "She's always looking for something wrong with me. I can't do anything right in her eyes." Elizabeth paused, listening closely. There was something in the way Claire spoke that made her wonder. Was Claire truly the victim here, or was there more to the story? Her curiosity only grew as she spent more time in the household. She began to notice small details. An expensive necklace hidden away in Claire's drawer, the way Claire would carefully inspect the servant's work to ensure it was done to her exacting standards. It wasn't just about appearances. It was about control, power, and something darker. But the biggest shock came one evening when Elizabeth overheard a conversation between Mrs. Montgomery and her son, Charles. Mrs. Montgomery's voice was filled with concern as she spoke about her daughter-in-law's behavior. "I know she's hiding something," Mrs. Montgomery said. "I can feel it, and I won't rest until I know the truth." At that moment, Elizabeth understood. Mrs. Montgomery wasn't testing Claire for no reason. She had her suspicions all along, and now she was willing to go to great lengths to expose the truth. As the days passed, Elizabeth found herself torn. She had always been taught to keep her head down, to do as she was told. But now, as she watched the interactions between mother and daughter-in-law, she realized that the truth was more complicated than she had ever imagined. Then, one evening, as the moon hung high in the sky, Elizabeth overheard something that would change everything. Claire was speaking to her husband, Charles, in the quiet of their bedroom. "You think I don't know what your mother is up to?" Claire's voice was sharp with anger. "She's always trying to test me, always trying to make me prove myself. But I won't let her control me." Elizabeth's heart skipped a beat. For the first time, she saw Claire in a new light. Not as the cruel, indifferent woman she had come to know, but as someone who was under immense pressure, someone who was fighting for her place in a family that didn't trust her. The next day, as Elizabeth was going about her chores, she saw Mrs. Montgomery watching her closely. There was a moment of silent understanding between them, a moment when Elizabeth realized that the test was about to take an unexpected turn. As the days turned into weeks, Elizabeth's role in the Montgomery household became more complicated. Her initial discomfort in the guise of a servant slowly gave way to a deep sense of unease as she observed the intricate dynamics between the family members. Claire's coldness toward the servants persisted, but it was her interactions with her husband, Charles, that now intrigued Elizabeth the most. There was something fragile about their relationship, a sense that it was hanging by a thread. Every evening, when Charles would return from his business dealings, Claire would greet him with a smile that seemed too forced, too perfect. She would make small talk, offering him dinner or asking about his day. But Elizabeth could see the tension in her eyes. She had always believed that Claire's beauty and charm had been enough to win over the family, but now she wasn't so sure. One evening, as Elizabeth was dusting the shelves in the grand library, she overheard a heated argument between Claire and Charles. It wasn't the first time she had heard them argue, but this time, the words they exchanged carried an edge of desperation. "I can't do this anymore, Charles." Claire's voice cracked with emotion. "Your mother is constantly watching me, judging me. She treats me like I'm not even good enough to be in this house, let alone be your wife. What more do you want from me?" Charles was silent for a long moment before he finally spoke, his voice low and strained. "Claire, you don't understand. My mother, she doesn't trust easily. She just tried to protect this family, and she's testing you to see if you're truly the woman I thought you were." "Protect the family?" Claire scoffed bitterly. "She's trying to control everything, Charles, and you're letting her. I can't live like this." Elizabeth's heart ached for Claire. She had always thought of her as a woman consumed by her own pride and vanity, but now she saw a different side, a woman desperate for love and acceptance, caught in a battle with a mother-in-law who seemed determined to break her. But at that moment, Elizabeth's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden, sharp sound, a sound that made her freeze in place. It was the sound of footsteps approaching, slow and deliberate. She quickly turned to look, her heart racing, but she saw nothing. The hallway was empty, or so she thought. As the days passed, the tension in the Montgomery household seemed to mount. Elizabeth could feel the weight of the unspoken conflict between Claire and Mrs. Montgomery growing heavier with each passing day. It was as if both women were locked in a silent war, with each trying to outwit the other. The subtle glances, the hushed whispers, and the veiled threats became more frequent. Elizabeth could no longer ignore the feeling that something was about to happen, something that would change everything. One evening, after a particularly long day of cleaning and serving the family, Elizabeth was in the kitchen when she saw something that made her stomach drop. Claire, looking unusually weary, walked past her and out into the garden. Elizabeth hesitated for a moment before following her at a safe distance. As she rounded the corner of the house, she saw Claire kneeling by the fountain, her hands clasped together as if in prayer. But there was no peace in her face, only a deep sadness that spoke volumes. Elizabeth hesitated, unsure whether she should approach. But before she could make up her mind, Claire's voice broke the silence. "I don't know how much longer I can do this, Elizabeth," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your mistress, she's testing me, pushing me to the brink. Every move I make, she's watching, waiting for me to fail. It's like I'm trapped in a game I can't win." Elizabeth's heart went out to her. She had never seen Claire this vulnerable before, this exposed. For the first time, she saw a woman who was not a villain, but a victim of circumstance. "Why don't you just tell Charles?" Elizabeth asked gently, her voice filled with concern. Claire shook her head, her expression one of defeat. "You don't understand. If I tell him, he'll think I'm weak. He'll think I'm just being dramatic, and his mother will have one. I can't let her win, Elizabeth. Not after everything I've been through." Elizabeth stood there, unsure what to say. She had no answers, no wisdom to offer. But she understood now that Claire was not the enemy in this story. The true enemy was something far more insidious: pride, fear, and a deep-seated need for control. Later that evening, as Elizabeth was cleaning the dining room, she overheard a conversation between Mrs. Montgomery and her son, Charles. She had learned to be quiet and observant, listening for clues, and tonight was no different. "She's hiding something, Charles." Mrs. Montgomery's voice was firm. "I've seen the way she behaves when she thinks no one is watching. She's manipulative, and I won't stand by and let her ruin this family." "But, Mother," Charles began, his voice tired, "I've told you before, Claire is just under a lot of pressure. She doesn't mean any harm." "Pressure?" Mrs. Montgomery scoffed. "What she's doing is more than just pressure. She's lying, scheming, and you're too blinded by love to see it. I won't allow her to tear us apart." Elizabeth's heart raced as she realized just how deeply entrenched the conflict had become. Mrs. Montgomery was no longer just testing Claire. She was determined to expose her, to destroy her reputation. And Claire, for all her flaws, was fighting back in her own way, desperate to prove her worth. As the night wore on, Elizabeth felt a sense of dread wash over her. The truth was becoming clearer with each passing day. This was no longer just a test. It was a battle for control, for power, for love. And the stakes were higher than she could have ever imagined. By the end of part 2, the tension between Claire and Mrs. Montgomery has reached a boiling point. The secrets that have been carefully hidden are beginning to surface, and Elizabeth is caught in the middle of a battle she never expected. The truth, it seems, is far more complicated than anyone had anticipated. The days grew colder as autumn approached, and with it, the simmering tension in the Montgomery household seemed to reach a critical point. Elizabeth, caught between the warring forces of Claire and Mrs. Montgomery, felt the weight of the looming confrontation bearing down on her. She knew that things could not go on like this for much longer. One way or another, the truth would come to light. It all began one fateful evening when Elizabeth was assigned to prepare dinner for the family. As she moved quietly through the kitchen, the sounds of a heated argument reached her ears from the grand dining room. The voices were unmistakable: Charles's deep, authoritative tone and Claire's sharp, defensive words. "I've had enough, Charles." Claire's voice trembled with emotion, but it was fierce. "I can't live in this house any longer with your mother constantly judging me, accusing me of things I haven't done. If you don't stand up for me now, I swear, you don't understand." Charles cut her off, his voice filled with frustration. "You're not seeing what's right in front of you. My mother has been through a lot. She's testing you, yes, but it's because she cares. She wants to make sure you're the right woman for me, for this family." "No." Claire snapped back, her voice rising. This isn't about her caring. This is about control. She's trying to destroy me, Charles, and you're letting her. Elizabeth's heart pounded as she listened, torn between her sympathy for Claire and her growing unease about the whole situation. She had witnessed the simmering conflict between the two women from the beginning, but it was becoming impossible to ignore the truth anymore. There was something much deeper at play than mere testing or jealousy. Something far darker. As the argument escalated, Elizabeth's hand froze on the kettle she was about to pour water from. She had to act quickly. But what could she do? She couldn't interfere in a conversation so personal, especially not when she knew nothing of the full story. Yet, there was one thing she did know. The time had come for everything to be exposed, for the truth to finally be revealed. That night, after dinner, Mrs. Montgomery summoned Elizabeth to the study. Elizabeth's heart raced with a mixture of anticipation and dread. She had no idea what was about to unfold, but deep down, she felt that this would be the moment that would change everything. Elizabeth, Mrs. Montgomery's voice was cold, but there was something else there, an underlying tone of something far more calculating. I trust you've been keeping your eyes and ears open. I need you to tell me everything. I want to know what Claire's been up to. Her behavior is unacceptable, and I need you to confirm what I already suspect. Elizabeth hesitated, a sense of guilt washing over her. She had never been one to betray anyone's trust, especially not Claire's. But the request was clear. Mrs. Montgomery wasn't asking. She was demanding. I don't know what you mean, madam, Elizabeth stammered, choosing her words carefully. She's been under a lot of stress lately. The house is difficult to manage, and don't lie to me, Elizabeth. Mrs. Montgomery interrupted, her voice rising. I know what's going on. I've seen the way she looks at me, the way she talks to me when she thinks no one's listening. She thinks she's better than me. That's why I'm testing her. I'm giving her a chance to prove herself, to show that she deserves everything she has. But I fear she's failing. Elizabeth could feel the weight of Mrs. Montgomery's gaze, like a pressure building inside her chest. She didn't know what to do. How could she betray Claire after everything she had heard, after seeing the exhaustion and vulnerability in her face? But she also couldn't ignore the obvious truth that Mrs. Montgomery was on the verge of unraveling the family, all in the name of testing Claire. Before Elizabeth could respond, the door to the study swung open abruptly, and Claire stepped inside, her face flushed with anger. What's this? Are you conspiring against me now, Mother? Her voice was harsh, but there was a tremor of fear in her eyes that Elizabeth hadn't noticed before. Mrs. Montgomery didn't flinch. I've been trying to be patient with you, Claire, but it's clear you're hiding something, and I intend to find out what. The two women locked eyes in a silent standoff, and for the first time, Elizabeth saw how truly alike they were, both strong-willed, both determined to win at any cost. But it was clear that their conflict had gone beyond a simple clash of personalities. This was a battle for power, for respect, and ultimately for control over the family. Then, something unexpected happened. Claire's face softened, and she took a step forward, her voice now calm, though still edged with emotion. I haven't been hiding anything, Mother, she said, her eyes focused on Mrs. Montgomery. But I'm not the one who's been manipulating everything from the shadows. The words hung in the air, and Elizabeth's heart skipped a beat. What was Claire saying? Who was manipulating things? She looked between the two women, confusion and fear settling over her. This was no longer just a test of character. This was a web of lies and deceit, and the truth was about to explode. Claire's next words came as a shock to everyone in the room. You're testing me, aren't you? Just like you tested your first daughter-in-law before me. But what you don't know, what you never bothered to find out, is that I know your secret, Mother. I know who you really are." There was a moment of stunned silence. Mrs. Montgomery's face paled, her lips pressed tightly together as if she had just been struck by a blow. Elizabeth's breath caught in her throat. She had no idea what Claire was talking about, but the weight of her words was undeniable. "Don't play coy, Claire," Mrs. Montgomery sneered. "You don't know anything." "Oh, but I do." Claire's voice was steady, her gaze unwavering. "I know that you're not really just a wealthy widow. I know that you were once a servant in this house, just like me. And I know what you did to the first woman you tried to control. I've heard the stories, Mother." The room fell silent, and the tension reached a breaking point. Elizabeth watched as Mrs. Montgomery's face twisted in shock, and then quickly masked itself with an icy resolve. She had been found out. The game had changed, and now all of their lives were about to be turned upside down. The tension in the room was palpable, as if the very air around them had thickened, charged with the weight of the truth finally being exposed. Mrs. Montgomery stood frozen, her once impervious demeanor cracking under the pressure of Claire's words. Elizabeth, caught in the storm of emotions swirling around her, could hardly believe what she had just heard. For a moment, there was nothing but silence, the kind of silence that hangs heavy, like the calm before a storm. Mrs. Montgomery's eyes darted between Claire and Elizabeth, her lips quivering as if she were searching for the right words to deny the accusations. But Claire's gaze didn't waver. There was no doubt in her eyes now, only a quiet determination. "You don't have to pretend anymore, Mother," Claire continued, her voice gaining strength. "I know what you've done. You've been playing games with us all. First, you tested me like you tested every woman who came into this family, trying to see if we were worthy of your son. But it wasn't about testing us, was it? It was about power, your need for control. You used your wealth, your status, your manipulations to make us fall in line." Mrs. Montgomery took a step back, her face blanching, the weight of her past catching up with her. Elizabeth could see that this wasn't just about the current generation, but about years of carefully constructed lies. The matriarch of the family, the woman who had seemed so unshakable, was now unraveling before their eyes. "You have no idea what you're talking about, Claire," Mrs. Montgomery finally spat, her voice cold, but lacking the strength it once had. "You don't understand what I've been through, what I had to do to survive." Claire's eyes flashed with something that wasn't anger. No, it was something much deeper. "I understand more than you think. I know who you were before you became this cold, calculating woman. Before you married Charles's father and put on this mask of wealth and power, you were just like us. A servant, working in this very house." The truth was out, and with it came the undeniable realization that Mrs. Montgomery's carefully crafted identity had been built on secrets, on hidden truths that now could no longer be kept buried. Elizabeth watched in stunned silence, realizing that the woman who had always seemed to hold the reins of the family's legacy was, in fact, a product of a past that she had tried to bury. Claire continued, her voice softening slightly, but the pain in her words was clear. "You took everything from the people who trusted you. You turned your back on your own blood, your own roots, to secure your place in the world. You didn't test us because you cared. You tested us because you were afraid that we would see through the facade, afraid we would uncover the truth." Mrs. Montgomery looked away, unable to meet Claire's gaze. Her shoulders slumped as if the weight of her past had finally become too much to bear. It was then that Elizabeth understood. Mrs. Montgomery had never truly seen the family as a place for love and growth. She had only seen it as another battlefield, a place to secure her position, her power, no matter the cost. "I did what I had to do," Mrs. Montgomery muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. You have no idea how hard it was, how many sacrifices I made. I never wanted this life for myself, but I made it for Charles, for all of us." Claire shook her head, her eyes hard. "You made it for yourself. Don't try to justify it now. You've hurt too many people." The silence that followed was thick with emotion. Elizabeth felt a deep sense of sympathy for Mrs. Montgomery. She could see the cracks in her armor, the raw humanity behind the cold exterior. But at the same time, she couldn't ignore the damage that had been done, the lives that had been manipulated, the people who had been used as pawns in a game of power and control. Then, in a quiet voice, Mrs. Montgomery spoke again, her words heavier now, almost as if she had given up trying to hide from the truth. "I didn't want to be the villain in this story, Claire, but I didn't know how else to survive. And I didn't know how to love. Not like you do. Not like Charles does." It was then that Elizabeth, who had been a silent observer, finally spoke. Her voice was steady but filled with a quiet strength. "Maybe it's not too late. Maybe you can still learn to love." The room seemed to still as her words hung in the air. Mrs. Montgomery's gaze shifted to Elizabeth, and for the first time, she seemed to see the woman who had been quietly standing by, the woman who had witnessed everything yet never judged, never sought to tear down. "Elizabeth," Mrs. Montgomery whispered, her voice breaking. I didn't know how to treat you either. I thought you were just a maid, the servant. But you've shown more kindness and strength than anyone I know." Elizabeth took a step forward, her heart softening in the face of Mrs. Montgomery's vulnerability. "Kindness isn't a weakness, madam. It's the only thing that can truly break the cycle. I've seen what your love for Charles has done for him. Maybe it's time to see if that same love can heal the wounds you've inflicted." Mrs. Montgomery remained silent for a long moment, the weight of her past, her mistakes, pressing heavily upon her. Finally, she nodded, a faint glimmer of something resembling hope in her eyes. Maybe you're right." Claire, still standing in the corner, watched the exchange with a guarded expression. The revelation had been a shock to her, but had also given her something she hadn't realized she needed, an understanding that her mother-in-law was not just a villain, but a woman who had been shaped by her past in ways she could never have imagined. There was still so much pain, so much distrust to work through, but there was also room for healing. "I'm willing to try, Claire," Mrs. Montgomery said, her voice quieter now. "I know I've made mistakes, but I don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose this family." The words hung in the air, and for the first time in a long while, there was a sense of possibility, of redemption, of reconciliation. The secrets had been exposed, the lies laid bare, and now there was only the future to look to. It wouldn't be easy, but it was a start. As the family stood together in the quiet aftermath, Elizabeth realized that no matter how broken things seemed, no matter how many mistakes had been made, there was always a chance for change. And sometimes, all it took was the courage to face the truth and the willingness to let love heal the wounds. The Montgomery family, like many families, had been torn apart by lies and secrets. But now, they stood at the edge of something new, a chance for a fresh beginning. The road ahead would be difficult, but with kindness, empathy, and a willingness to change, they could rebuild what had been lost. And that, Elizabeth realized, was the most powerful lesson of all. The days following the revelation were unlike any Elizabeth had ever experienced. The household was no longer shrouded in the tense silence that had previously defined it. While the weight of the truth still hung in the air, there was a sense of cautious optimism, a realization that even in the deepest of secrets, there could be room for healing. Claire spent much of her time with Mrs. Montgomery, offering her the space to reflect on her past actions while also encouraging her to change. It wasn't an easy task, and Claire had moments when she doubted whether true change was even possible. Mrs. Montgomery had spent so many years entrenched in her ways, in her need for control, that the idea of vulnerability, of truly opening up to others, was a challenge. But Elizabeth saw a shift in her. It was subtle, like the first signs of spring after a long, harsh winter. Mrs. Montgomery had started to soften, to listen more, and, most importantly, she began to value kindness above her previous ambitions for power. Elizabeth, too, felt a transformation in herself. As the woman who had always been an outsider in this family, first the hired help, then the wife, she had struggled to find her place. But now, she felt a newfound sense of importance. She had been the bridge between the past and the future for the Montgomery family, the one who could help them navigate the rocky terrain of their past mistakes and emerge stronger for it. One evening, as the family sat together in the dining room, an intimate, somewhat awkward gathering, they began to talk openly. Mrs. Montgomery, her hands trembling slightly as she lifted her glass of wine, broke the silence. "I know that I can't undo what I've done," she began, her voice surprisingly gentle. "I hurt so many people, including you, Elizabeth. I pushed you away when I should have embraced you. But I want to change that. I want to be a better mother, a better mother-in-law, and a better person. I don't know how long it will take, but I'm ready to start." Elizabeth's heart swelled with emotion. She knew that forgiveness would take time. It wasn't something that could be easily achieved in a single conversation. But the sincerity in Mrs. Montgomery's words was a step forward, a real one. Claire looked from her mother to Elizabeth, her eyes reflecting a mixture of relief and disbelief. She had never expected this moment to come, but here it was. And though it was far from perfect, it was a beginning. Charles, who had been mostly silent during this exchange, finally spoke up. His voice was calm, but filled with gratitude. "I've always known you had your reasons, Mother, but I never realized the depth of your struggle. Maybe we all need to look at each other differently to see beyond the surface." The family sat in silence for a few moments, allowing the weight of Charles's words to sink in. It was clear that the past could not simply be erased, but they all seemed willing to work toward a future where understanding and compassion could take precedence over judgment and secrets. As time passed, Mrs. Montgomery's transformation was visible to everyone. She began to spend more time with Claire and Elizabeth, and there were fewer moments when she tried to assert dominance or manipulate situations. Instead, she tried to support the family in ways that were meaningful, even if they were small steps. A kind word, a thoughtful gesture, these things mattered. Elizabeth, too, found herself growing in confidence. She no longer felt like an outsider. She had become a key part of the family's healing, a symbol of the power of patience and understanding. Her relationship with Mrs. Montgomery, while still a work in progress, had deepened. They had started to talk more openly about their experiences, their hopes, and their fears. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. In the midst of this healing process, something unexpected happened. Mrs. Montgomery made a grand gesture, a way to show her commitment to changing, to proving that she was no longer the same woman who had been driven by her insecurities and thirst for control. She had decided to donate a large portion of her fortune to a charity that helped the underprivileged women of their village. It was a cause close to Elizabeth's heart, as it mirrored her own humble beginnings. Mrs. Montgomery had never shown much interest in the struggles of others before, but now she was taking action in a way that spoke louder than any words could. Elizabeth was moved to tears when she heard the news. It wasn't just the charity, though that was important. It was the gesture itself. Mrs. Montgomery was finally recognizing the power of generosity, the value of selflessness, and the need to give back. It was a lesson learned the hard way, but a lesson nonetheless. That evening, As they gathered to celebrate the donation, Claire turned to Elizabeth and smiled. "We've come a long way," she said softly. Elizabeth nodded, her heart full. "We have, but I think the real journey is just beginning." And so, the family moved forward together. They knew that the road ahead would still have its bumps and challenges, but they also knew that they were no longer bound by the lies and secrets of the past. The foundation of their relationships had been rebuilt on honesty, kindness, and a shared desire to be better. As the night drew to a close, Mrs. Montgomery looked around the room at her family, her son, her daughter-in-law, and Elizabeth, and for the first time in years, she felt truly at peace. There was no need for control, no need for manipulation. What she had been searching for all along was the very thing she had been too afraid to give: love. And in the end, that was the most precious gift of all.